So other people have told you stuff how to do things. I will ask questions. First question, the big question is, can you upgrade to Puppet 4? Why is this an important question? Well, Puppet delivers software, so upgrading Puppet is quite easy. I just have to refresh my local repo copy, or I just fetch it from Puppet Labs directly, and I install it and I'm fine. Are you? There are two pieces of software you have to take care of. There's one piece of software, this is where Puppet Labs takes care of. This is the Puppet Master and the Puppet Agent stuff. There's another piece of software, which was developed by you guys. You wrote Puppet code, you wrote Puppet manifests, and you need to ensure that this new version, that your old version of the software is still functional with the new version of the Puppet Master. So you need to check, are my modules still working on Puppet version 4 or even Puppet version 3? So what I'm going to talk about is what is best practices, what is bad practices. I have some bad examples, I have good examples. And I want to show you a little bit on the end, what is it that is new within Puppet 4. So, who's me? I'm from Berlin, Germany, so take care. I'm one of the guys who was looking in the wrong direction when crossing streets here in London. Besides this, I'm doing Puppet consulting, supporting companies mostly in Berlin and in Germany, doing the trainings, and I'm also co-organizing the Berlin Puppet user group. So, polls, everybody likes polls. I also like polls. There are a couple of people around here who already use Puppet. Maybe some words back to me. I'm from Germany. That is the reason why I have such a hard accent. And the other thing is, I don't know British grammar at all. So please excuse me, and afterwards, if you have questions, please try to talk like to a little child. Maybe I understand. So the first thing is, now I'm putting a question to you. Who of you is using Puppet and is still using Puppet version 2? It's getting less and less people. That's awesome. Okay. Who's already using Puppet version 3? The majority. Awesome. Is there still someone left who's using an elder version of Puppet, 0.24.5 or stuff like that? None at all. That's great. So it seems as if upgrading so far has been quite easy for you guys because you were able running on newer Puppet versions. So why do you need to bother? Why do you have to take care? Puppet has a very, very fast release cycle. What is it? It's 3 months approximately for a minor release, once a year a major release, roughly. Puppet Labs itself is listening carefully to the users. And they say, hey, when someone has a new idea regarding best practices, they will adopt these best practices. They will announce them within the documentation. They will write blog posts. Gary will, for example, write blog posts about changing best practices. And it's your turn, your task now to adopt to these best practices. Rarely, they're changing functionality. They will change functionality in Puppet 4, definitely. They will break with old deprecated stuff. So far, they only did deprecation warnings into log files. Everybody's reading his Puppet Master log files, of course. Well, okay, most people will read their log files. Well, I know a few people who read their log files. And the big thing is, within Puppet 4, many changes, and Puppet 4 is coming. On PuppetConf, I asked the people, okay, can you make a proposal, a rough assumption? When will Puppet 4 be released? They said, we're trying to get it released by the end of this year. But at least they promised that they will do a Christmas present to us by having at least a release candidate available by the end of the year. But next year, Puppet 4 will be out. So why should you upgrade? Well, there has been stuff like Poodle and other SSL, non-SSL stuff, which makes SSL not really useful. So there are security updates on a regular basis. Maybe you want to make use of new functionality. Maybe most of you are already running on Puppet 3, so for the people who still run Puppet version 2.0, maybe you want to have the automatic data bindings. Puppet modules directly looking into Hira without the need of doing an explicit Hira call. Maybe you want to use the environment path. You want to have more flexible environments. Maybe you've heard about it. There's RTMK around. making it easy for you spinning up new environments via Git branches. Maybe some of you are already that experienced that they want to make use of, and they have heard about the future parser. Who has heard about the future parser? Who's using the future parser? Wow, tough guys. So, future parser is a new implementation of the parser. It's already in Puppet 3 and 8 Puppet 3 versions, but it's not enabled by default. You have to enable it by yourself, but Puppet also says, hey, take care, it's not ready for production. We will change stuff, we will change naming of functions and stuff like that. The other thing is, maybe you have troubles finding something or getting a solution for something. And either it's the enterprise version or it's the open source version. You want to have someone who's answering your questions. And most companies do that, and even in the community, they say, hey, which version of Puppet are you using? Why haven't you upgraded to the newest version? There's a bug. And what you're describing is a bug that is known in the old version. You have to upgrade. So there are reasons why you want to upgrade the Puppet code. The next thing then is your Puppet DSL code, the modules you are writing, what you're coding, is it still working on the newer Puppet versions? I know companies that have had external people doing their Puppet coding. They left the company 1.5 years ago. They were only needed for a short time. So they've written the Puppet code and it's still in production and nobody takes care on adopting to new Puppet versions. The code was written on old best practices. We've heard examples like with a file resource type, you can give the source an array of where to look for the file, and Puppet will do a first match. That has been done for quite some time, but it's definitely no longer on the best practices list. So maybe you want to adopt to new best practices. And of course, you check your Puppet log files for deprecation warnings. So, when it comes to newer Puppet versions and your Puppet DSL code, what is it that you have to look for? The first thing is the inheritance stuff. Especially coders really like inheritance because they say, we do that in standard coding software anyway. We do a version initial class and then we inherit and add new functionality to that class. The next thing is I've seen in many installations not making use of the autoloader, but using import instead. I've also seen installations where they said, okay, there's a remote module. And instead of wrapping this remote module in their private module, they just took the remote module and changed it locally. And what is really, really bad, especially nowadays, I have a short demo showing you what is working and what is not working. This is the not working stuff. Do you access non-local variables without scope? There has been something like, Puppet tries to find the proper variable for you somewhere within your manifests. Not good. So, luckily, I've never seen this code examples like this, building up a complete family. A grandfather, a grandfather, a son, and having classes that have multiple levels of inheritance. If you do that, please either refactor or even throw it away and start from scratch. Especially normal inheritance, where you just say, okay, I have a class and I want to have that class behave in another way. I have a class that enables something on a platform, and now I want to disable that, so I just inherit that class and doing the disabling then. That's no longer needed. You have parameterized classes, so you can not just use inheritance, you can use parameters to identify how should my class behave, what is it that my class is doing, describing my systems by adding parameters to classes. And there's only one still valid approach for inheritance, and that is inheritance from a params PP. Who knows the params PP pattern? Only a couple. Okay, so I try to explain. It's mostly done by people who develop Puppet modules on the module forge. So they say, okay, we do some stuff which handles, for example, an NTP installation and configuration on the system. And now they want to take care of multiple different operating systems. And instead of putting a real large block of operating-specific data into the initial Puppet module file, they say, okay, no, don't put it in init.pp, put it into params.pp. Within params.pp, we are taking care on operating system-specific data. What is the package name, the service name? Where's the configuration file to be found? Is there a special user that needs to get created? Think about Apache, and on CentOS and Debian, you have even different Apache users. So this is put into params.pp, but you still want to allow your users to override this stuff. So you're inheriting from params.pp with your main class, making it a parameterized class. What I've seen very, very often is importing. Yeah, we have that one file, and the other developer has did another Puppet manifest, and just put it next to the file and just do an import. So in this example, you have an SSH module, and in your init.pp, you're importing a file named server.pp. It really looks into the file and says, okay, I'm making that available, what's inside that file. In server.pp, you find a class that is named SSH secured. Hopefully no one comes upon the idea of saying, okay, and I'm adding a class SSH secure.pp, which also has the class SSH secure, which gets pulled by the auto-loading concept of Puppet modules. So I'm unsure which class will be taken care of, the one in the server.pp or the one in the secure.pp. So instead, don't do import. Use proper namespacing on manifests to enable the autoloading, to allow autoloading of Puppet classes on the master, and use include instead. Please stop modifying remote modules. Who's using remote modules either from the module forge or from GitHub? Who's not using standard library? Okay, everybody is at least using one module from the module forge. The standard library is installed from the module forge. Either you have the Puppet Enterprise version, this is pre-bundled, or you have installed it later on. So even standard library. So if you add new functionality, don't do that by just changing code you have downloaded from someplace else. Do you patch your own Apache version for making it better functional for you? Or will you say, okay, no, we mentioned that upstream. So on shared modules, start working with upstream. You want some functionality into the standard library. You're looking for a function which is not yet there. You want to have it available. I need to check whether a host name is resolvable, for example. It's not yet inside standard library. So do a pull request. At least open an issue for it. And wrap it in your private module. Don't modify remote modules. It makes it impossible for you to later on upgrade this remote module. And the variable scoping. One of the biggest problems I've seen at customers so far is they don't use scoped variables at all. They have old practices like, we have a variable named server, it has a value, and within another class we just use that variable. Yeah, that's fine. Puppet will find it for me. Yeah, hopefully it will find it for you. Do you have another module which also makes use of the variable server? Which one will get taken in advantage here? So don't do it that way. Instead, please scope your variables. This is all within one module. Within one module, you can look up variables from other subclasses. Try to omit variable lookups over multiple modules. It puts you in a dependency between two modules. One module needs a variable from another module. So you have a strong dependency between two modules, which is not good. There's not only variables in manifests, there's also variables in templates. For example, you have, let's stick with the SSH configuration. You have a system where you will allow root access via SSH, maybe even with password, and you have a system where you would like to disallow that. So inside your SSHD configuration file, you're taking care on a variable whether it's just set to true or false to enable or disable root access via passwords, root access at all. So somewhere you have the ERB opening tag within a template saying, okay, hey, this is now where I'm looking for a variable, and you just say, this is the variable name. And this is deprecated Nowadays, you have to use either the abbreviation for the scope lookup var function with the at. You have other possibilities. You can use the scope lookup var function explicitly and name the variable you would like to have with the full scope. Or within Puppet 3, you can even shorten it by just using scope and putting the variable in brackets. Factor variables are also affected when it comes to scoping. I've seen an installation where they say, okay, here we have a node definition, and somehow that node was named wrongly when we set it up. And we said, oh, this is not good because it doesn't follow our pattern on the system's naming. But they said, no, it's too hard for us now to reinstall that server again. So within this node's site PP, they declare the FQDN variable, which is originally set by factor because it's the full qualified domain name of the host. And now they're relying on this non-factor variable. So they have difficulties adding the factor top scope to variables. So please, these are local variables. They aren't put into curly braces. You don't know where the variable name begins or ends. Instead, please start using scopes on factor variables to be 100% sure where does this variable come from. It's explicit. You know now, okay, this is the variable operating system with a double colon in front of it, so this is the factor variable. Makes it easier for debugging. Makes it easier to see where a variable does come from. When it comes to Hira, who's using Hira already? More than half of the people. Who's doing data validation? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Almost, okay, 6. At my actual project, they had a 3-day delay in delivering into production because they were running into a complete weird Puppet error. They could not explain it to them. I said, this is ridiculous. It's throwing errors regarding somehow in each function deep within the Puppet code itself, so the Ruby code from Puppet Labs. And they were debugging the code and they were saying, okay, do we have to patch Puppet? Is there now some functionality that we're using which is not already in our version we're using here? No. It was quite easy. They're using Hira data, and the development team decided, okay, we now don't want to have a string inside a variable. We want it to be an array. And inside the template, they said, okay, and now we're looping over the array. In production Hira data, but they still had a string only inside. So which caused the error because you can't loop over a single string, which is not an array. So please do yourself a favor. You're using standard, most of you are using standard library already. So make use of the validate and is functions that are available in the standard library. Take care that do not deal with data where you don't know the source. It's in Hira, it's not in the manifest anymore. Make sure that the data are in a way you expected them to be inside your manifest. If you somehow expect an array to be an array, well, check that the variable contains an array and not a bool or a string or a numeric value. What about, okay, we don't change remote modules, we just download them and we use them. And now we want to also upgrade Puppet. How can we identify whether the new version of Puppet is still functional with the old version, with the existing version of our remote module? Well, there are two different things you can look inside. First, there's the module forge, if you're downloaded from the module forge. Mostly there's the GitHub link to the repo. Inside the module, you definitely will find one or maybe even two files. There's the Puppet file, and there's the module file, JSON, I suppose. So take care if you just update, not your Puppet installation, the Puppet code, which comes from Puppet Labs, but if you update remote modules, maybe remote modules need newer Puppet versions to be functional. And check the Puppet file and metadata JSON file within the Puppet modules, whether they are supported by your Puppet version. So if you have an older version of the remote module and you're upgrading Puppet, also check your existing modules. Are they still functional with your new Puppet version? And please try to test stuff prior upgrading. Just upgrading the Puppet master and putting a Puppet run into production, hopefully everything's working. I hope nobody does it like that. So you want to actually test your Puppet DSL code. You want to make sure prior to putting it into production that when I'm upgrading Puppet, I still have a working, functional environment around. And there are multiple ways you can do that. The first thing is a very, very basic testing. Maybe just a semantic testing. Just testing that Puppet parser validates. It's a built-in functionality in the Puppet software itself. It just takes your Puppet manifest and checks whether you have all closing curly braces, whether you have put the colon behind the title. It doesn't look deep into whether the file source is really available. It just does a semantic check. The next two things are either Puppet syntax or Puppet lint. They do it more deep, in-depth checking. Puppet syntax strongly checks, mostly does Puppet parser validate, but also checks ERB templates. And Puppet lint even goes one step further. Puppet lint has knowledge about best practice on how manifest should look like. So style guide. And this style guide is coded, what is on the Puppet Labs description, website described, is put into code in Puppet lint. The next thing you can do is, let's do some unit testing locally. Like a developer who's developing a Java application using JUnit, a PHP developer using PHP unit, a Python developer using smoke tests, I suppose it is called. I'm not a Python developer, but at least there are possibilities of also testing Python code. Within Puppet you have the same. rspec Puppet, yes, it's a deep learning curve, getting fit into rspec Puppet, but it helps you a lot solving problems prior you put code even into a repository. The next step, we already heard some talks about that, Vagrant, integration testing. Spinning up a local virtual machine on your workstation and see whether the result is what you expected. You can log into the virtual machine and check automatically is an Apache listening on port 80 on that machine. So the simple rspec Puppet upgrade means you have to do many, many changes, not really changes, but you have to do add-ons to your Puppet manifest. You have to write rspec tests, you have to write a rake file, so it's a Ruby make file, for example. When you want to test different Ruby versions, whether something, maybe you're now upgrading from Ubuntu 12 to Ubuntu 14, you have a new Ruby version in place, you have written some functions in Puppet and you want to ensure that these new functions are also running on the newer Ruby version. And you want to test that locally. You can either choose RVM or RBenv to install locally in user space a Ruby version which you can then use for testing. You will write a gem file which will pull some stuff from either from a gem server or from GitHub. Please provide different possibilities for checking multiple Puppet versions. And then you run the rspec tests locally. I won't dig into rspec testing. It's a 2 days development course. Puppet, I visited the one by Puppet Labs, so it was done by Raphael Pinson, and it is absolutely insane. It took me quite weeks afterwards fully understanding what I have been taught in that training. So when you have that manual rspec Puppet test, you can also automate stuff. And well, Puppet is about automation. I like automation because I'm a system administrator and I don't like work. I want to do interesting stuff. And when I have to do something manually 5 times, I'm saying, no, this is not what I want to do. So I do it 1 time only and then have an automation in place. And also with rspec, there are extensions for Jenkins, Go, TeamCity, where you can say, okay, I'm pulling the repository, I'm running tests on that, and adding git commit hooks to it, to maybe first do the Puppet parser validate stuff. And then let another system run the rspec tests fully automatically. But there's also a simple upgrade test, a very, very simple one. It's the recommended way also by Puppet Labs. What is it that you need to do? Okay, you want to upgrade to a new Puppet version. It's just a Puppet version. You still want to have the Ruby version in place. You still want to have your modules in place. you would like to spin up a new server, just reuse your existing Puppet master. So what is that you can do? You can download the Puppet tarball, extract it, and you can start an additional Puppet master process. You just have to put it on another port. Okay, the port has to be open in terms of firewalling. And when you have that port open, you just can use any node within your system and can check, okay, is my Puppet master still delivering valid code? Without disturbing all your production, because the production master is still there and running. So, a short example regarding the steps. Very small, I hope that one can read it from upstairs. Slides will be online afterwards, better readable. So, I'm extracting Puppet 3.7.1 into another directory, somewhere into opt. Afterwards, I use my existing Ruby installation. I'm using Ruby 1.8, and I say, okay, I still want to use Ruby 1.8 with Puppet 3.7.1. And I'm spinning up an additional Puppet master, and I'm pointing it with the include or with the Ruby-lib environment variable, so that he finds his new installation of Puppet. And I just tell him, okay, use another master port, 8150. And within any Puppet agent in my existing environment, I'm telling the Puppet agent, okay, I'm doing a Puppet agent test run on the new master port, identifying whether my Puppet code is still working. And I have prepared a little demo for that. Almost readable. So this is the Debian system, just having installed the Puppet master process running as webbrick. I don't need the Apache performance around here. Was it Puppet version? It's 2.7.23. It's the standard Debian package. So the guy who set up the master was just spinning up a Debian stable server, and he used Puppet 2.7. I'm doing a Puppet test run, and I see, okay, there are some changes happening. It's mostly notices, so just print out some stuff. And it just tells me, here's something from a variable with the name Puppet Camp London 2014. It says me it's the base module on Puppet Master. Code is working as expected. Then I have downloaded, I don't know which version we want to use now. We want to use the version 2.7 anymore. We want to go to 3.6. Yeah, cool, awesome. So just for you to see what is happening now, I prepared a short script which just changes into a version directory and afterwards initializes the Puppet master on port 8141. And I'm testing with 3.0 to 6.2. Takes a couple of seconds. New Puppet master has started. This is my second shell on the same node. I don't have a multi-node system. I only have one master here. I'm checking for Ruby processes listening on my devices that I see on my network stack, and I see 8141 is the second Ruby process. Now I'm just doing a master port 8141. I'm doing a Puppet agent run against my master port. Right now, new one. And I see, oh, I got an error. The template is complaining stuff about a variable it cannot find. So bad, so bad. Okay, I can't use the version 3.6. There are other versions around. Okay, maybe we should stuck with version 3.3.2. Again, I'm spinning up a new master. Doing a Puppet master run against that master, getting the same error. This is ridiculous. And now I'm looking into my Puppet code. And what I see here is an unscoped variable. If people would have used the scope variable here, they wouldn't have had the trouble with the Puppet code. By the way, this unscoped variable is only working with Puppet 2.7. It's not working, even not working with Puppet 3.0. So you have to upgrade, if you want to upgrade from Puppet version 2 to Puppet version 3, take care of scope variables in templates. And there's Puppet 4 upcoming. It's the new major release. It removes some deprecated functionality, brings new features. So features, everybody wants features, but everybody who says, yeah, but keep the old play stuff still working. Don't make it break. We need it. We need to rely upon it. So what is deprecated in Puppet 4? Who of you is doing node inheritance inside PP? Okay, only a few. Who knows what node inheritance is at all? More people. Okay. Within Puppet, you could do for quite some time. You can still do it with version 3.7. You could define a base node, which is non-existent. You could say, okay, this is our basic stuff. We put stuff like inside, like example, SSH, security, LDAP configuration, some basic stuff which you would like to see on all your nodes. And afterwards you could say, okay, this is now the real node, and this node gets inherited with the inheritance or everything which is already declared on the base node. This is something which will go away with Puppet 4. Node inheritance is no longer possible. They said, no, don't do that anymore. Please use roles and profiles instead. The next thing, uppercase name variables. Most developers that I see that have a more understanding of Puppet, they say, yeah, but these aren't variables at all. I can set them once only. So it's constants. And constants, from a programmer's perspective, have to be written in capital letters. So I need to convince them, no, don't write them in capital letters. It will break in the future. So Puppet 4 will break stuff like having variables in capital letters. Variables with underscore in first position. Oh, we do that for marking them private. We have done that. Maybe you should use your company name prefix or stuff like that, but don't do an underscore in the first position. There was a possibility, I found it on the websites describing the new functionality, and it says, okay, there was the possibility of building references to classes by using the uppercase name of the class. Never seen that before, never used that before, so I'm happy I'm not affected by this breaking stuff. Hyphens and periods in name will vanish, and in case that someone has written Puppet manifests in Ruby, directly in Ruby, having not the .pp file ending, but the .rb file ending, please rewrite your code. The Ruby DSL stuff will vanish from Puppet when it comes to Puppet version 4. But there's new stuff that will bring. The first thing is strict variable naming and lookup, which means scoping. You are forced to do scope variables only. Unluckily, this will be deprecation warning in Puppet 4 only. It will be mandatory in Puppet 5, so maybe next year. It will bring something else. Nowadays, you have to take care on data validation. You have data in Hira, and somehow your security officer changes data in Hira regarding which SSL encryptions will I allow here, which hashes are allowed. And you don't know whether he now changes a string into an array or an array into a string, and you have to take care of all the data validation by using external functions, for example, from the standard library. Sometimes you have to write functions by yourself doing data validation. Puppet 4 will bring Puppet 4 will be the first Puppet version that is fully typicized. What is the correct term for it?
So fully typed.
Sorry?
Typed.
Typed.
Fully typed.
Okay. So it knows about floats, integers, bool, string, arrays, hashes. You can even go deeper and say it has to be an array which consists of at least two and a maximum of 5 elements. It has to be a string with certain things on the fourth or fifth name in the string. That there has to be some. It has to be a bool. It has to be a float with 2 digits past the dot and stuff like that. So you have type validation built directly into Puppet 4. So if you want to omit the step by adding data validation to your Puppet 3, try to support the people and get Puppet 4 ready and bug-free and do the type validation stuff in Puppet 4. The Boolean conversion regarding empty strings will change. When you nowadays check a variable, just checking if variable, nothing else, and the variable contains an empty string, it will nowadays deliver false. But an empty string is something that has a certain meaning. It's not undef, it's not false, it has a certain meaning. And Puppet is going to change that. And within Puppet 4, an empty string will return true. So you have to review your code where you do validation of variables with the if notation. The next thing is the environment path. It's already activated in Puppet 3 versions. You have the possibility of writing functions in Puppet itself, not in Ruby, but in Puppet itself. Means you have, for example, more functions which you can use inside your Puppet manifest. You can loop over arrays in Puppet 4. And it will provide a new function API, but the old one is still working. So where do I get all this stuff regarding the Puppet 4? First of all, there's a GitHub page, the Puppet specifications page. This is where they collect all the stuff, where they are going to change stuff, where they do even some discussions. And there's a blog from Henrik Linder, Puppet on the, I like bleeding edge, because it's very, very new, Puppet on the edge, which describes what is new, what is upcoming in Puppet, what are the changes, what are upcoming changes for Puppet version 4, and what is it that they have still kept back and will do it in Puppet 5. So, for you guys doing Puppet code, just one kind reminder. Always code as if the guy who ends up maintaining your code is a main psychopath who knows where you live. For example, someone like me. So, the question I put in the beginning, can you upgrade to Puppet 4? Do you have to be afraid by prior upgrading to Puppet 4? No. There are tons of ways you can do to make sure that your existing Puppet code will also continue working on Puppet version 4, which means, yes, you can upgrade to Puppet version 4. Thank you. And we still have a couple of minutes left for questions. Think about the baby prior talking. Yeah.
You mentioned that you shouldn't do class inheritance, but you didn't really say why.
I mentioned the, sorry, once more.
You shouldn't do class inheritance.
Class inheritance.
Class inheritance, okay. You shouldn't do class inheritance, but I haven't mentioned why. The problem with class inheritance lies in the variables. When you inherit, when you have a class and you're inheriting everything from the parent class, within the local class you have the variables with the scope from the parent class. And this makes it very, very difficult to identify where does this variable come from. So this is basically one of the big things, is most of the stuff has to do with variable scoping.
Are you likely to, if you upgrade to version 4, you're likely to encounter problems because of the versions that your Forge modules require? Because often they have, very strict requirements about which versions of STD live and all support and stuff.
The question is whether I expect problems when upgrading to Puppet 4 with modules from the module Forge, because they have the strict requirement on being on Puppet 3, lower 7 or stuff like that. Well, first of all, I rarely use modules directly from the Forge because they get updated too irregularly. When I look at the Forge to find modules which are made available, and then I always refer to the repo URL, to the workplace URL, which is mostly on GitHub. And normally I have a local copy in my own repository. I have added a remote, create a repository for that module, add a remote and pull a certain tag from remote. So I normally don't deal with modules from the module Forge. I use the module for finding modules, and then I use GitHub for fetching proper versions. So, which also makes it easy for me to do a pull request, because I say, hey, this is now working on Puppet 4, I have tested this locally, and I can do a pull request for having an updated version available. We still have some minutes left. No questions. So, yeah, two at once. Christopher.
Is the future parser, is that basically Puppet 4?
Basically, that's Puppet 4, yeah.
Yeah.
It's made available in Puppet 3.5, 3.6, somewhere around that. And in between Puppet 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, they even changed naming of certain functions for mapping hashes or something like that. And that is the reason why they say don't use that in production unless you follow deeply what are the changes that are coming. But yeah, this is basically the new future parser. What is actually the future parser, which you have to enable explicitly, will be the new parser in Puppet 4. Question over there.
You said that you should modify external modules.
Yeah.
You said you should wrap. Expand on how that works.
The question is, why shouldn't I modify remote modules? But instead use a wrapper for that module. First of all, there's a module and I want to use it more often. There's the Apache module, for example, and I want to use it more often, and I want to add some functionality. But upstream says no, this is too specific for your special, for you, what you want to achieve. This is too special. We won't put it into our upstream code. And that is the reason why I say, okay, I never ever would like to do changes to a remote module which gets developed by broad members of community, so I don't have to deal with it. I can just claim when something is not working. And then I'm building a wrapper module where I make use of that remote module and adding my own special stuff which I have on my platform.
But how do you go about doing that?
Normally, okay, I'm doing it that way. I have multiple module paths. I have one module path which is for upstream modules only. I have a module path which is for common modules, so common modules which I develop by myself for my own platform. For example, the validate whether FQDN is resolvable stuff, functions like that. And then I would build another module path, and there I would prefix them with the project name, company name, and inside that module I would then say, okay, this is my Apache module, and within that my Apache module I would make use of the upstream Apache module from GitHub, Puppet's Apache module, and would then add the extra functionality which I need into my module and not in the upstream module.
Yeah, in your own thing there you said not to use node inheritance, instead use rows or profiles.
Rows and profiles, yeah.
Which method would you recommend, or are they much the same?
The most easy thing you can do is when you put everything you have in your site PP within a node. So you have a site PP with all your nodes declared. And the most easy thing is put everything you have in that node classification, put it into a new module, and name it, give it a proper name. So the aspect is, why roles and profiles at all? All within Puppet is about abstraction. You have the types of providers. The providers, they abstract what needs to be done explicitly on the command line. What is the command? What are the parameters for the command? This is abstracted. You use the types. The next thing is you're abstracting types by building classes and modules. So it's the next abstraction layer. And then this is all the technical view. And you have the business view on your machine. When you ask your boss, what is that machine over there? He said, oh, this is our CRM database management system. And then you ask someone from Technic, from the ops team, and says, hey, what is that system? Oh, forget, yeah, this is our security nightmare. It's a PHP MyAdmin installation. And you have somehow combined these two views, the technical view and the business view. And this mapping is something you can do in roles and profiles. It's a common wording saying roles and profiles. Sometimes you only need one of these levels, not both. But you would then build a new module and write inside the module what is this node should become like. So on the node where you now have all the stuff inside, like installing PHP, installing Apache, installing PHP MySQL, MyAdmin, you would then build a role which does the same. But you want to have, from node classification, you want to have one thing only that you want to classify to a node. That is the pattern of roles and profiles. There is a very big blog posting by many people. They came on the idea almost in parallel, which describes this more in detail.
Last question.
Okay.
Is standardly going to be included in Puppet 4 or is still going to be a separate component?
I could hardly understand.
Standardly, is it going to be included in Puppet 4 or is it
Standard
going to
lib.
be a separate component?
So,
Is standard
Is
lib
standard
included?
lib going to be
standard,
included?
no, Puppet is still Puppet. So when it comes to open source, Puppet is only Puppet, and standard library is a module that gets developed on the module forge. There has been some discussion on the mailing list whether stuff from the standard library should somehow merge over into the Puppet open source stuff. And as far as I have followed it, they said no, let's keep that out of Puppet. It's not the scope of Puppet. The scope of Puppet is building the abstraction layer, and the scope of standard library is building add-ons, is delivering add-ons for this abstraction layer.
Okay, thank you.